Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Thrive YouTube channel. My name is Jonine Johnson, and I'm the Cape Town representative for Thrive. And this evening, I'm going to be chatting to a dear friend of mine, Dr. Ronelle Davids. Ronelle is a social worker. She's also a lecturer at the University of Western Cape, and most recently obtained her PhD. Please welcome Ronelle to our channel. Hello, Ronelle, and welcome.
Hi, Jonine, and thank you for the invitation. Happy to be here.
Thank you. I know you've got a very busy schedule, so thanks so much for being here this evening. So, Ronelle, I know you for a little bit over 2 years now, so I know a little bit more about you than our audience members. So, for the sake of our audience members who don't know you, can you just give us a little bit of background into the work that you did within the deaf community, how that all started, and exactly what it is that you did within the community, and specifically, if you may, tell us the work you did with parents specifically who are parenting deaf children.
So I started my career actually in the deaf community about 20 years ago as a social worker, as well as a sign language interpreter. But I think as a social worker, I didn't really work with the parents of deaf children. I basically work with the adult deaf. And so obviously many of my clients who were coming to me, a vast majority of them were talking about the experiences at home, how they lived experiences at home in terms of living with a hearing family, and how quite often they felt isolated and not part of the community or of their family, and experiencing communication problems, communication conflict, and so forth. And I think that is where my interest really lied, between the gap between the hearing and the deaf worlds, especially between the parent, the family, and the deaf child. I then did my master's, where my master's, my topic looked at the experiences of parents when a child is diagnosed with a hearing loss. And from that, there were quite a few challenges that parents were talking about, and they were really talking about the experiences when the child was diagnosed and what that meant for them. And then I decided to go and expand on my studies, and then focus on looking at what are the challenges, what are the support out there for parents parenting children with hearing loss. And through the study, I was then able to then develop guidelines for parents parenting children with a hearing loss.
So let's talk a little bit about that then, the challenges that parents face. Research shows that over 90% of children who are born with a hearing loss are born into two hearing parents. And the vast majority of those families have never been exposed to the deaf community before, or deaf culture, or know nothing, or very little about hearing loss. So let's talk a little bit about those challenges then, because I would imagine receiving a diagnosis such as that, and not knowing anything about the diagnosis or hearing loss must come with a lot of anxiety for parents, because I know myself, being a parent of a deaf child, I certainly knew nothing about it, and it was quite overwhelming for me as a parent. So can you talk to us a little bit about those challenges that parents shared? What were the experiences, and perhaps if they shared with you how they were able to navigate through that journey,
So if I just think about the findings, and also what was shared with me in the study, the majority of parents were saying how overwhelmed they felt. As you rightfully said, that 90 to 95% of children with a hearing loss are born to hearing parents who absolutely, or sometimes knows nothing about hearing loss. They don't know anything about hearing loss. They don't know about deaf culture. They've never met a deaf person. And some of them would ask me, how do I parent a deaf child? I don't know. I've never met a deaf parent. I mean, or a deaf adult or a deaf child. So this feeling of overwhelmness was one that they experienced. And also they would talk to me about the various challenges in terms of roles and responsibilities. Now they've got an extra responsibility or an extra role that they never thought about. And they were not prepared for those roles. They also spoke about, for example, the understanding of hearing loss. What is hearing loss? Many of them, what I found quite interesting at the age of 14 or 15 or 16, some parents didn't understand what type of hearing loss their child actually had. They didn't understand, for example, the audiogram of the child. It was never explained to them. A diagnosis was given, but what diagnosis in terms, what did mild hearing loss mean? What did profound hearing loss mean? So the audiogram, what does the audiogram mean? What does it say? So parents, those were some of the challenges that parents were talking to me about. They were saying that they felt extremely stressful. It was not just managing the child itself, but in managing the family itself, the spouse, the siblings within the family. It was about challenges around communication. How do we communicate with our child who is now deaf? And so some of them experienced parenting a child as satisfying as well, stressful and life-changing. That is what they were saying to me. And some of them were saying it's hard, it's difficult, it's not easy, it's frustrating. You know, these were all things that they were sharing with me. Some of them were saying they felt a feeling of guilt, they felt feelings of shame. And so all of these things were challenges that they were experiencing, lack of communication. And so because I can't communicate with my child, there's this feeling of guilt. So if I can just give you an example, when it comes to communication challenges, you know, in families, there are rituals, there are celebrations, there are you know, family cultures within the house or home cultures. And some of them were saying they could not share this with their child because of communication. So these were some of the things that they were saying. They were saying to me, for example, lack of support. Lack of support. Where do they go to when they need to talk to other parents? And so these were just some of the challenges that the parents were sharing with me during my research.
And a lot of the challenges that you've mentioned, a lot of that I can actually relate to, as I see it, having parenting a deaf child myself way back roughly 12 years ago. I myself went through those very same emotions and experienced those very same challenges. And one of the things that we experienced as a family was the effect of the diagnosis. So yes, it was quite overwhelming for us as parents, but having another child, the impact of that diagnosis on that child almost went unnoticed. Is that something that came up in your research as well, the impact of the diagnosis on siblings and extended family members?
Yes, that definitely came out. So although my focus was on parents and their experiences, but what came out very strongly was that the whole family was affected by the hearing loss. So I know there's an author called Lutterman, and he was saying that when a deaf child is born into a family, the whole family is deaf. And sometimes, and that's when I mentioned earlier, the feeling of guilt and the feeling of shame. The feeling of guilt comes when a mother or a father feels that sometimes they've paid too much attention to the child who has the hearing loss, and the child who, the sibling, often the hearing sibling would feel isolated or might feel that too much attention has been placed on the child with the hearing loss. And then sometimes there's sibling rivalry that takes place. So what came out of the research was that, you know, we need to have a family-centered approach. Yes, the family is a unit, and within that unit, you have parents, you have spouses, you have siblings. And so how do they interact with each other to make the family as a whole function? So you could say that maybe the child with a hearing loss is born into the family and there's a disequilibrium within the family. But how does the family navigate through that disequilibrium? How do they function as a family? And so we need to look at, as I said, the family as the whole, the spouse. How does mom and dad talk to each other? How does it affect their relationship that the child has a hearing loss? So how is their relationship affected? How is their relationship with the other hearing sibling affected? How is the hearing sibling and the sibling with the hearing loss, their relationship affected? And so very much you can have one-on-one assessments, one-on-one interviews, one-on-one counseling sessions, but the family as a unit must also be counseled. I forgot to mention that from findings, what was also revealed was that parents were saying that they needed an outlet. They needed to speak to someone where they felt comfortable to vent and to talk about their experiences, about their challenges, about their frustrations, about their victories, about their celebrations. But they needed a soft space, a comfortable space where they could sit down with someone who actually understands them, and who will allow them to talk about these frustrations. Either it's on a one-on-one basis, counseling session, or with the spouses, and to talk to, sometimes they would say that I don't know how to talk to my spouse. We've lost this connection. We don't know how to communicate because my focus or my role is now so much focused on the child with the hearing loss that we have lost our communication, our connection. And so sometimes we need that space to come in. I need to tell that person, this is how I feel, this is what's happening, it's too much for me. And so they needed that, what the findings reveal, that parents were saying, we as parents need a place, we need someone, or we need to go somewhere where we can be felt that we are being heard, that it's a safe space.
Yeah. That's very important, and I like what you say about family-centered approach, because I think it's important to look at the family as a whole, holistically, because there's so many challenges that comes with this journey that one can sometimes overlook the family dynamic as a whole. And then you also mentioned parents speaking about needing that, as you say, soft space in order to vent and feel heard, which brings me then to the topic of isolation. I think, again, having experienced it myself, if you're going through this for the first time and haven't been exposed to it before, it's so easy to feel isolated. It's so easy to feel that you are alone on this journey and that nobody understands what you're going through. Family, friends perhaps don't understand. And it's important for parents to feel that there is a community who's there to support them, you know, and that they have that space to vent, and again also to celebrate the victories, because there are lots of victories one can celebrate. So Ronelle, in your experience and in your conversations or in your research that you conducted with families, what were some of the interventions or recommendations that came out from that research to help families on their journey? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So the recommendations were coming from the parents, and I think that's important to note, that it's not just coming from the professionals working within the deaf community, but it's actually coming from parents. And parents were saying that they needed parent-to-parent support, meeting other parents who are also going on this, who are also experiencing the same emotions, challenges, whatever that, you know, who is experiencing the same journey as them. And so maybe to walk this journey with another parent. And also, you know, from parent to parent support, not just having it, and I think there was a lot of emphasis from the research, and especially from fathers, that were saying mothers need support. But the mothers were saying, but fathers need support. Often mothers take on the role, of the nurturer. She takes on the role of taking the child to the doctor, for the appointments. And so it's mothers felt that fathers need support. Fathers need to talk about their experience, and somehow they need to form a father group if they could have something like that. They were also talking about meeting up with deaf mentors. Often they not, as we said, 90% to 95% of deaf children are born to hearing parents who have not met a deaf person. And so they feel that they need to hear from adult deaf mentors. What was their experience growing up in a hearing family? And so deaf mentors could also not just be for the parent, for the hearing parent, but for the deaf child. So they can see that, oh, this is an adult deaf person. And they are talking about their experience and says, so maybe I too have a voice and I too can speak about my experiences. And that was the other recommendation, that we also have support groups, a group for the child who has the hearing loss, for them to talk about the experience, for them to understand the audiogram. Why am I deaf? Why am I the only one that's deaf in my family and not the others? And this comes to family-centered interventions or programs, so children, what the findings reveals that some children don't even understand why they are deaf. Some siblings, hearing siblings, don't understand why their sibling is deaf. So again, the family intervention, coming together and talking about that. So I think they also spoke about strong support that they need from family members and from friends. Because sometimes, when a child is born with hearing loss into a family, extended family members would say, but, this has never happened in our family before. This is quite strange that now suddenly we have this has never happened. How can we have a deaf child in our family? And so this isolation, ostracization in the community, within the family, and sometimes it's, the child with a disability, it's either seen as a stigma. And so they were looking at, we need support from our own family and our own family members, grandparents, aunts and uncles need to understand what is hearing loss, because their attitudes affects the family, their attitude affects the child as well, and the siblings, and community awareness as well. And we're talking about unbiased support from professionals. And often when they meet professionals, professionals maybe have self-interest, and they would steer families or parents into a certain direction or the type of intervention that they think can help this family. Look, and they would, all good intentions, they would do that. But they just felt they need to hear, parents were saying that they need to hear the full story. They need to have information to make decisions, and they should be empowered with information to make decisions. And that comes back to the provision of information. That was the other finding. They need information to make informed choices. It helps them to and decisions, as well as helping them to cope, helping them to understand, with understanding, and so that was important for them, that they are provided then with unbiased information, and that they also felt that they should be recognized as experts in the field of their own of the child's hearing loss, because they know, they have experiences, they are living the experience, it's lived experiences, and the acknowledgement by professionals that I'm the expert in my child's life. I hear what you say, I hear, and I'm thankful for the advice, but also let me also make those decisions for us as a family, and for the child as well. So those were some of the recommendations. And as I said to you, it is very much engaged research. It is research that comes from parents. It is not a top-down approach, but it is a bottom-up approach. getting to hear what parents are saying, and then looking at interventions or programs as to how we can go about helping parents on this journey that they are experiencing.
I think it's so powerful and important to hear from parents. As you said, parents are the experts in their kids, and it's wonderful to hear that the interventions and the recommendations and the suggestions are coming from parents themselves and not necessarily all from professionals. So that's very powerful, and an informed parent is an empowered parent. And when you are empowered, you make informed decisions that serves and is suitable to your family.
That's right. And that's important what you're saying there. Sorry to cut you, to interject there, Janine. It is about your family. Each family is different. Each family's needs are different. Each child's deafness, hearing loss is different and unique to them. And I think when we talk about collaborative working together. And so what best is suited for that family, for that parents, for that child. So as I say, each family is unique, and each child's hearing loss is unique as well.
Okay. So Ronelle, you mentioned earlier about the bottom-up approach as opposed to a top-down approach. If I may ask, in your opinion, what do you think the benefits are of that approach, of hearing from parents, having parents come forward and speak up and give their intervention, or rather their recommendations on how they can be best supported, as opposed to, as you say, the top-down approach? What are some of the benefits of that approach?
Like I said before, it was engaged research, where you hear from the parents, you hear from what they want, what are their needs. And so I think what's important is partnerships, forming partnerships with various NGOs that work within the field of hearing loss, work in the field. You get your professionals that are also working in this field. So how do we work together to serve the needs of parents, to serve the needs of the family, to serve the needs of the child with a hearing loss? And so for me, it's important that we can take this research and say that there's evidence-based research to say this is what parents are saying, this is what parents' challenges are, then this is what type of support they would like. So there's evidence now that's coming from parents. And so I know that there are 2 organizations in South Africa that are doing quite good work, and their work has been documented. So we know what's been done. So there are many other organizations who are doing brilliant work as well. They are working with families, they are working with children and so forth. But the work that they are doing is not maybe documented. And so there are organizations out there that are doing good work, working with parents, working with children. And so it's forming a partnership with these organizations and then writing down, documenting what they are doing, so that parents, when they say they lack information, they don't know what is happening, they then can say, but this is what organizations are doing for us as families. Or right now they are saying that there's too little that's happening, and this is what we want. And something like that, a document like this or research like this can be taken to government and say, this is what we are saying, this is what our needs are, this is how we need support. Can you support us financially? Organizations can say that as well. There's research, can you support us in this and this and way? And so how do we partner with government in terms of government meeting their goals in terms of families? We can have policies on families, we can have SDG goals, when we talk about families and inclusivity and so forth, but how do we work with the people on the ground to ensure that all of these things are then met. So it's about partnering, working collaborative with each other, and I think that's important. And so, like I
like
say,
that.
it's engaged research, and if I might be so bold to say, with local relevance, which can make an impact when it comes to parenting and families, when parenting and parent and family support when it comes to having children with a hearing loss.
Yeah, I think it's important, the words that you use, partnership and collaboration, or collaborate. I think if parents can work alongside with other deaf organizations, a lot of good work can come from that, because like you say, it's coming from the bottom, it's coming from the parents. The parents are raising their voices and saying, this is what we need. And I also think in that way, we don't miss the mark, so to speak, so that whatever programs are implemented to help parents, support parents, to facilitate their journeys, that we don't miss the mark, that whatever programs are being developed and being made available to parents, that it works, that it's programs that are there that will provide the support that parents are asking for, and in so doing give them the support that they need, and that filters down then to the child and to the extended family. So there's a definite role then for deaf organizations as well as government. Just as a last input from you, Ronel, before we end, are we moving forward, do you think, or do we still have a way to go in your 20 odd plus years? And I won't give your age away, as you said, in your experience of working in the community and working with parents and working with deaf organizations, have we come a far way, or do we still have a way to go? How far are we from reaching that? Because I know funding is a big issue for a lot of organizations, and because of that, a lot of programs can't be developed or implemented. How far how much work does still need to be doing? Are we on the right track in terms of programs that organizations are putting forward for parents?
I think we've done a lot. A lot can still be done. Like I said to you, there are organizations out there that are doing good work. It's just not documented. And so if I think about 20 years ago, like you said, yes, we've come a long way. I think back then we worked in silos. And back then I see an integration. I can see parents and the deaf community working together. Before, it was very much, it was parents and deaf organizations that were not working together. They were not forming partnerships. But I see there's a move, there's a shift in that parents are now involved in deaf communities or deaf organizations. They are sitting on boards. They're volunteering. If I think about some of the schools, they're involved in children's in the education of children, and so forth and so forth. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but there is already a lot of work that has been done by various organizations. If I just think about Thrive, for example, Thrive has a program where parents are mentoring other parents. They're walking with other parents on this journey. There's another organization that actually train deaf facilitators or facilitators who are working with parents. We also, I think they are training deaf mentors as well. So there are little highlights that's happening out there in the community. But I think it is, some parents are not seeing it. As I said to you, the information needs to be shared. And that's the important thing that we need to do, documenting our research, documenting information, getting it out there to parents. And also, like I said, unbiased information need to be shared with parents as well.
A lot of interesting points and a lot of important points as well, Ronelle, that you've raised and that we've spoken about. And I hope that by sharing this conversation on our social platforms, that the right people sees it and hears the voice and hears what parents are saying and what parents are asking for. So thanks very much, Ronelle, for your time again, and thank you so much for everything that you do for the deaf and your work in the deaf community. And I hope to chat to you really soon. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Janine. I really appreciate the opportunity of just sharing the research with you as well as with the audience. So I really do appreciate the opportunity as well. All right.